Here we'll look at some of the misuses of statistics, how you can kind of manipulate things to favor you and things you should watch out for. The first is suspect samples. So we want to know how large is the sample. This is important. To say 50% of people do something and then realize that your sample size was only 4 people isn't really saying much. So we want to make sure we have large samples. Also, how was it selected? Is everyone represented? Are you represented in this study? A big one that came out recently is Ambien, the sleep drug Ambien. It came out that their trials only had men in their samples. So it turns out that women actually do need different dosages of Ambien, and so we had been overdosing women because there were no women in the trials. So that was a suspect sample. We do need to realize that these things are important. Are you represented in this sample? Another one is ambiguous averages. When people say average, there are 3 things it can mean: the mean, the median, and the mode. These can be drastically different for a data set. And so when people say average and don't specify which one of these 3, it's very ambiguous, and they can pick one that favors their view, and then just using the word average doesn't really tell you a lot. So you want to make sure which one of these 3 that you are using. Another one, changing the subject. This can be just wording things in different ways. Let's assume that we are politicians and we're running for office, and someone says, oh, I just want a 3% increase in the budget. This doesn't seem that much at all. However, maybe their opponent words it differently and says, my opponent wants a $10 million increase in the budget. These could mean the exact same thing. However, how they're worded definitely influences the way people think about it. So this is a tricky one that can be really hard to avoid. Another, detached statistics. So we see these a lot in commercials and in products. So we say, oh look, my product has 1/3 fewer calories. And then that's it. But fewer calories than what? Another leading brand, what you had before, another random thing, maybe you have 1/3 fewer calories than a stick of butter. You haven't told us what you're referencing. Implied connections. So these are things that say, oh, this may help your cholesterol. Another one is to say studies suggest. This means it hasn't actually been proven in any ways. We just think, oh, maybe. Another one is in some people. This doesn't really tell us much as well. So we want to watch out for these things that sound good but aren't really connections. They're just kind of implied that it might be good. Another is misleading graphs. So these are really things you want to watch out for. One of them is, does it start at 0? Does your y-axis start at 0? You can find lots of misleading graphs online. There are some that, once again, they don't use the y-axis to start at 0, so a very, very small jump can look huge. There's also some going around where people use pie graphs that don't add up to 100%. And things like that. So these are some misleading graphs, so you really want to watch out for these things. Another one is faulty survey questions. I can word my questions to make you change your mind a certain way. So for instance, I'm going to survey my city and find out who wants to build a park. Typically, a lot of people are going to say, yes, I want to build a park. Parks are good. However, I could also go around and say, do you support raising taxes to build a park? And most people don't want to raise their taxes. So now they're going to say no to this. So this can be a really tricky thing to watch out for. Which one of these is really better? Well, I guess that really depends on what your goal is. So you do have to be careful with these survey questions and making sure you're not leading someone to an answer. Interviewer influence. If I'm talking to you one-on-one, I may influence things. For instance, let's suppose we are a police station and we're a lot of cops and we are trying to find out about drug use. So we're going to go around and ask people, have they used drugs? Chances are they're not going to openly admit this to the police officers. So this would be interviewer influence. You could also see someone on the side of the street wearing a shirt that's talking about saving the planet and polling people to see if they support a new recycling program. Most people are going to agree with them and say, yes, that sounds good, even if they wouldn't have normally, just because of the way the person presents themselves. The last one we'll look at is source of funding. So this doesn't necessarily guarantee a bad study, but it is something to watch out for. If I have a fast food restaurant and I fund a study that says eating at my restaurant daily is good for your heart, well, that kind of benefits me and I make money off of that. So maybe we want to double check that this isn't actually a good study. So we do want to be careful for the source of funding. We want to make sure that the person who funded the study doesn't have any monetary gain in the results of the study.